Hello, and welcome to the Chicago Humanities Festival and today's Chicago Neighborhood Check-in on higher education, part of a series of programs exploring big topics at a very local level. My name is Ira S. Murfin. I'm the program manager for neighborhood partnerships and a Mellon ACLS Public Fellow here at the festival. We are at the beginning of an exciting and unprecedented fall season, so please visit chicagohumanities.org to learn more about upcoming events, including future neighborhood check-ins, and to help support the festival by donating or becoming a member. You can also explore our online archive of past programs, including previous neighborhood check-ins. Thanks to our captioner for making this event more accessible. All digital events have closed captioning, which can be controlled through YouTube. You can learn more about accessible services at chicagohumanities.org/access. Today's program is presented in partnership with Kennedy King College, Lake Forest College, and the Institute for the Humanities at the University of Illinois at Chicago. After the conversation, visit the event page for this program to learn more about these partner institutions and the communities that they're part of. All of this week's programs are presented with the support of the Robert R. McCormick Foundation. Now, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce the festival's Marilynn Thoma Artistic Director, Alison Cuddy, and our guests, Gregory Thomas, Mark Canuel, and David Schneiderman. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Ira, for that introduction. I too am very pleased to be here with three of our partners, Dr. Gregory Thomas from Kennedy King College, part of the City Colleges of Chicago, David Schneiderman, Dean, Provost, Professor at Lake Forest College, and Mark Canuel, who is the head of the Humanities Institute at the University of Illinois at Chicago. As Ira said, we are entering this fall season in very exciting, unprecedented, uncertain times, and we're seeing all kinds of entities, museums, cities, humanities festivals, rethinking their mandate in this current moment because of this combined set of crises, pandemic, public health, political, and economic. And so too is higher ed. And the conversation has been a lot about the operations of universities and colleges, questions around the safety of student bodies and faculty, administration, all kinds of questions. But as part of our neighborhood series, we thought we would focus the conversation on understanding higher ed as a part of a larger community and how these institutions are positioning themselves to be good neighbors in this period of time. You know, like libraries or cultural centers, universities and colleges are anchoring places in communities and part of really vast networks that take them beyond those communities. So through their immediate physical environments and communities around them to sites across Chicago and the state of Illinois, and then spreading far beyond the borders of our city or our state through this, the more far-flung academic networks that they're part of. So we're proud also to be partnering with all of the people gathered here today. All are engaged in our process of developing a new neighborhood programming initiative, and all are also actively cultivating and expanding their own public-facing initiatives, many driven by humanities and scholarship within. So whether their students and faculty are working within different communities and engaging them different ways, or they're partnering with organizations like ours to do public programming, I think we're all feeling the sense of being part of very, very different communities and how that's impacting how we think about our mission overall. So I think it'll be a really great conversation today, even though we can't gather together as we once thought we would be this fall. We are still collaborating and excited to be doing so. So I want to start by asking all of you to tell us about, as you're returning, or you've all returned, you've all begun your fall sessions and have been doing that for a 3 weeks now in these very unusual circumstances. How is that changing your understanding of the different communities your institution is part of and your responsibility toward those communities? And Dr. Thomas, if you don't mind, I'll have you start us off.
Well, I think to begin, it's safe to say this is definitely business that is not usual. So we've definitely had to pivot to this new norm as well. And again, I think it's safe to say that the key change has been how we deliver our instruction and services to students. And I think it's pretty evident that we've had to move in the direction of providing an online presence through remote instruction and through remote services as well. Speaking of the community, Kennedy King is nestled in the heart of Inglewood. And one of the challenges that we've faced for many of our students, there is a significant digital divide in our community. We have the highest number of households in the community that are lacking a computer at home as well as internet access as well. So that's been a little bit of a challenge for some of our students. What the college has done in response to that is to make sure that our labs are available and accessible to students. We've also been fortunate to work with donors in our city that have made donations to the City Colleges of Chicago, and working in conjunction with our chancellor and making available laptops for students at no cost. So we make necessary changes to make sure that the education, delivery of instruction, as well as services have been provided to our students. We're trying our best to respond accordingly.
Thank you. David Schneiderman, how is your thinking about the communities you're part of or feel a responsibility to changing in this current moment?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I just want to thank you, Alison, and everyone at the Humanities Festival for inviting me here today. And it's really just an honor to be on this panel with Mark and Gregory. So thanks to everyone. It's a really, really great question. And like so many institutions, we lived through this emergency pivot in the spring where all of a sudden the world changed. And, that was almost overnight. And that felt like a real emergency situation. And I think it did for everyone in terms of quality of instruction around the country, in terms of how individual faculty and staff members are navigating being in their home studio and having kids and pets and all of these other challenges. And so when we got through the spring semester, we really wanted to deliberately and intentionally plan for fall. And like so many institutions, we aspired to bring students back. And we had I think, a good solid plan for doing so with testing partners, contact tracing, et cetera. But we also knew that the virus had to cooperate, right? And the virus was not cooperating. So at the end of July, we made the decision to pivot fully remote, like many of the institutions in the Chicago area. I felt that this was important for the health and safety of the community, but even before we got to that point, we decided as part of our duty of care for everyone in our community that we would not mandate that faculty return, right? It's very important that faculty have the choice based upon their own safety considerations as to where teaching would be best for them. Now, in a way, that's moot because we're all in the same situation. But Lake Forest College is a national and international liberal arts college that has students from every state and all over the world. And so our community is like in a diaspora situation right now. Everybody is scattered and they're in many different time zones. And so I think the main way that this has fundamentally changed us is we have to expand our notion of what our duty of care is for each other. That goes for the things I've already said about giving people the flexibility they need, but it extends even this way. We prioritize for the fall synchronous education. That's really the bread and butter of what we do. We like to do this with students, knowing, of course, that 3 hours of this in a row is a lot and there's some asynchronicity built in. But we also know for time zone reasons, for financial reasons, for care reasons, some of our students have been disrupted and they can't engage with us easily in this way. So we have a process at the college that speaks to your question for students to request approval to learn asynchronously in one or more courses where they don't have to sort of convince each faculty member that they need a special accommodation. We just provide that accommodation based upon their individual circumstance. And it was really important for me that it took account of time zones, but also my parents are no longer employed and I now have to work in order to get my education, right? Or I'm caring for someone, or I have siblings who are on the Wi-Fi with me. So we've encountered these digital divide issues, but I also think that kind of maximum flexibility for everyone while preserving the core of what we do, which is access to faculty, the integrity of the academic program, and our belief in our community are all things that we can do, but they are all new and they are all kind of, endless questions about how to do it. But if we keep those core principles in mind, I think we come out ahead, and I feel good about where we are right now.
Thank you. Mark Canuel, what would you add to this picture? What did things look like from the vantage point of UIC in terms of communities and your responsibility therein?
Thanks for that question, and thank you and Gregory and Davis for joining the conversation. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and the role of online learning has obviously been central at UIC as well. And Davis's comment that this has been a more intentional enterprise rather than just an emergency response, that really has been pervasive at UIC. I also think it's worth mentioning here that it has brought out new strengths within the university, accentuating some programs and initiatives that may have seemed somewhat marginal. Lots of humanities departments did not see online learning as anywhere near the top of the menu in their strengths, but lately the situation that we've been in has called for a mastery or at least some proficiency in the digital. And so just from my own standpoint at the Institute for the Humanities, I had just happened to begin a digital humanities initiative last year. And so while I thought this was a kind of boutique program that we did at the Institute, it's become really central. Everyone wants to do digital projects, students want to do them, faculty want to do them, and we've even done a lot of teacher training through this initiative. And it's brought out a lot of expertise on our campus, you know, in order to retool our instructors to teach in the fall. But the other thing that I'd like to emphasize is just in terms of reaching out in new ways to our communities, that UIC, of course, being a research university in the middle of Chicago, has always been part of the fabric of the city, but the recent events have called for an even more intense relationship with the community. We have faculty members who are serving on the mayor's racial equity task force. We have people who are serving on the mayor's COVID recovery team. So these administrative relationships have intensified with the city, but also just the faculty have become more involved in a variety of projects that connect the university with the community, and I can go into those, but I would just say that connecting the university to our community is something that has intensified over the course of the past few months.
Yeah, I think I'm just struck by listening to all of you. There can be a perception of the town and gown divide, as it's been called at different moments. But all of you, in talking about the needs of your student, your faculty, the relationship to the larger city, there's a clear sense that you're nestled very closely and entwined with communities around you in varying ways. And I was struck, I was reading, it was a survey that Inside Higher Ed did this, a magazine dedicated or online journal dedicated to thinking about issues of higher ed, that they did a survey, and while most college presidents at that moment, this was this summer, were confident in their ability to educate students safely and well, and it sounds like there's been some adjustments that have had to be made across different institutions that we're all watching and learning from. You know, they felt that they could manage that safety in ways on or off campus, but far fewer believed that their institutions could ensure the safety of vulnerable people in their surrounding communities. And you've all talked, and especially you, Gregory, talked about the vulnerability of the community around you. And I just wondered what you thought about that, like the charge, if you're rethinking what your relationship to community is, do you feel compelled and do you feel positioned to be able to help support those vulnerable communities that might be in close proximity to you or somehow connected to you through varying mandates? And Davis, I'll have you start us off on this round.
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the interesting things about Lake Forest College, which is nestled here, you know, close to the Lake Michigan shore, about 30 miles north of the Loop, is that we exist in the suburban space, but we also in so many ways exist in the kind of urban ecosystem. Many of our faculty and staff live in Chicago. And so just even the process of taking the train during a pandemic, right, becomes a new issue for people to consider. but our students are from all over again. And while we have a large international grouping of students and a large national, we have many, many students from the city of Chicago, from the collar counties, from just over the border in Wisconsin. And so all of these areas of our community are simply reminders for me. When we would normally have 1,200 students on campus, we have 50 now, international students who are not able to get to a better destination where they can learn more effectively. We are so like dendrites coming out of a brain. We're interconnected with all of these other areas. So right now we have a large Mellon grant, about called Humanities 2020, which is about race in Chicago. And we have many partners in the city, one of them being the Humanities Festival, where we're working on specific projects that are meant to kind of activate local communities and to really get our students what I think of as transformative experiences. So for me, it's not town gown, it's sort of gown and many towns, and they're all interconnected all the time. And the old kind of snoozy liberal arts college model of, ivory tower, and you go there and you're in a bubble, that bubble burst a long time ago. But these changes, these technological changes, are just making what was already real even more evident. And so I just imagine that on the other side of this, we reaffirm what I already know to be true. The only long-term strategy for education, I believe, higher education in this country, is to get more and more connected with communities and to get more and more involved in areas of civic improvement and to working to really deal with the actual entrenched problems for the people that we serve by where our students and faculty live, but the communities that we are adjacent to and connected to. I could give more detail, but let me stop there because that's just kind of a 30,000-foot way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and Gregory, can I bring you in on this question too around, the vulnerability of the communities around you? You invoked that in your first response, and how you see your institution's role in trying to move people towards safety or help secure people at this moment.
Yes, thank you for the question. I will say that we were pleased that we had already started those dialogues prior to the pandemic. And the college made a concerted effort to be very precise about community engagement. So part of our mandate here at the college is to serve the community and to be a beacon for dialogue and support and communication and enhancement for the community and foster social mobility. But obviously during the COVID-19 pandemic, the focal point of safety was paramount to us as an institution of higher learning, but also in terms of meeting the needs of the community as a community partner. So we partner with CORE, for example, to provide free mask giveaway on several occasions throughout the peak of this pandemic. We've also provided free giveaways of food and other essential necessities for our community as well. We've also provided another assortment of opportunities for our students, for our community, for engagement opportunities for health and protection and safety. So we're very pleased in terms of some of the things that we have done to be a partner in this community and help to foster the safety of our citizens in this community.
Thanks. And Mark Kenwell? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And UIC, while I do think that some parts of its more distant past did often feel as if it was separate from its community, and the relation to the Italian American community from its inception was somewhat fraught. When you look at the history of the institution, but that really has changed over time, and there is a very close-knit relationship between UIC and its surrounding communities. And at the moment, just to cite a couple of examples, the medical school is involved in vaccine trials, and there is a COVID task force at UIC that is specifically designed to address problems within surrounding communities. Jenny Breyer is on that. We have people from the School of Public Health that are on that. And then just speaking at the more granular level of research, which is the one that I'm a little bit closer to because I'm director of a research institute, a lot of faculty have been doing research projects that have engaged people in communities surrounding us. For example, we have a sociologist, Andy Clarno, who's doing a police surveillance project that is examining the levels of police surveillance in relation to COVID and protests. And that's just an example of the way that our faculty are engaging with the surrounding communities in Chicago in general, but also those areas that UIC is more directly a part of.
Alison, could I possibly add one thing? I think it's, as we all know, that the African-American community was hit probably the hardest throughout this pandemic. We saw the numbers nationally as well as locally here in Chicago as well. In fact, I believe our first case, documented case, came out of Inglewood, if I'm not mistaken. We did partner with Blue Cross Blue Shield as well, along with groups like RAGE and others, to provide free mask giveaway too, to try to have an immediate impact on the community in terms of making sure that masks were there to be distributed freely through the community. So that's another initiative that took place at the college.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, I mean, it makes me think a lot about equity in general, right? And that's become a very charged issue within, I mean, has been for a long time, but now in this moment with these additional pressures of the pandemic and also lots of questions around emerging out of a political movement, which is really very strongly expressing itself. The question of equity has come up, and I, you know, part of the interesting thing is that you all are in very different parts of the city that have different relationships to power, different, the issues of equity or racism or anti-Blackness fall differently across your different communities, your different student bodies. And I think it can be hard to think about equity in some ways, or challenging to think about that across your different institutions. But do you see a way in which your institutions collectively could be addressing these issues of equity that you just raised, Gregory? I'm just curious how you would respond to that. Davis, maybe you could jump in here.
It's interesting. We formulated a community advisory committee, and we did partner with the UIC in terms of looking at some of the data trends with regards to healthcare and some of the socioeconomic disparities and issues of equity. So we've been working with the UIC in this regard as well, and we actually utilize some of that data to guide some of our actions related to the pandemic, but other actions as well. We speak to social equity issues.
Thank you. Yeah, David Schneiderman?
Sure, thanks. This is an interesting question that I think we could approach several different ways. And I'll say, aside from the community partnerships that we are engaged in, I think in some ways, one of the mechanisms to do community work more effectively is to spend as much time as necessary looking at internal practices and procedures, right? How does one approach a partnership? How does one train students to effectively do a dialogue in a community that they may not be from? And so we really have a strong anti-racist agenda here at the college, which has been percolating for a number of years, but certainly the what's going on nationally has just given that even more impetus than it already had, and it had a significant amount of impetus. So we have what is effectively an opt-in common read of the Ibram X. Kendi book that I know you're well familiar with, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And so not only are we organizing opportunities for faculty, staff, students to simply talk about it, but in many ways we're looking at action. So our Office of Faculty Development has not only many events this fall on how do you work in the remote environment and what else can you do to be effective, but we have 3 how to be an anti-racist in your syllabus programs, which are really faculty training sessions. The first one is to think about policies in the syllabus. The second is how to develop anti-racist class content. And the third is to develop anti-racist assignments and assessments. And so we really think at the level of policy, getting everyone to look at what they teach, how they teach it, and what are the mechanisms that need to be equitable in order to deliver that instruction becomes really important. We also, like many other institutions, don't envision doing a lot of new hiring this year for obvious reasons, but there's an exception that I'm very cheered about. We have some special donor funding for 2 new faculty positions to support our African American Studies program and our Latin American and Latinx Studies program, in addition to what we have in those programs already. And so we'll be embarking on national searches, and in so many ways, having everyone here at the institution talk together, think together in different groups, and all at once about what we can do in terms of policy, so that when individuals are out of their seats, right, when I'm no longer the provost, when the Office of Faculty Development person is switched, when there's new faculty teaching, we can leave a legacy of change that is really vibrant and sustainable. And that can inform so much of our community impact.
Mark, Gregory was talking about a collaboration between UIC and Kennedy King that has helped to directly address issues of inequity. How do you see building on that, or other kinds of collaborations of that sort across institutions to speak to issues of inequity and racism?
I think this is a really interesting question, and just having this conversation has made me aware of how our ambitions, even though we're pursuing them separately sometimes, some of the collaborations are on and off between our campuses, but I think that maybe this can be the beginning of some serious ways in which we connect our campuses on a long-term basis. But the question really got me thinking about the fact that a place like UIC, which is a public research university with 70% of our students on some form of financial aid and with no racial or ethnic majority on campus, is a force of equity. It is, because of its very mission, an equalizing force. But I think that over time, what has happened is that the university has wanted to project those values outward, even as it wants to be changed by the community. And I think that's one of the very exciting things that has been happening over the past 10 years, that give and take between our diverse communities and the university itself, and that has led a lot of us to want to induce change. And again, at the somewhat more granular level that I've been seeing among my colleagues, we do have a lot of people, even in the humanities, who are engaged in projects that are like Rachel Haverlock's Freshwater Lab, that are focused on particular communities that are vulnerable to toxicity and environmental damage. Rosa Cabrera, who's in our Latino Cultural Center, has been working on the unequal effects of climate change in areas ranging from Pilsen to Mexico. And those are projects that are very much brewing in the university, but that are reaching out to communities and attempting to be agents of change within them. And that I think realize that organic relationship between the university and the community that I'm talking about. And I think to get to your question, though, these are projects that already do involve other universities and that are very flexible and can welcome in new members. The Freshwater Lab, for example, is involved in a consortium of institutions with lots of community members, and so the more adherence we get to the cause, the better.
I wanted to just, we have a couple of questions from the audience who's watching this program, and I'm about to turn to those, but I just wanted to ask you all to respond explicitly to something you've been talking about that I was curious to understand, that how what's happening in the communities around you affects internal operations or policy. Davis, you were talking about that. Mark, I think you just were, and Gregory earlier. So I mean, this is just one example. If there are protests outside the university or within the university, what does that mean internally? What does that mean for policy? And do you see a kind of shift in how quickly those forces that are obviously you're part of and that are affecting the community around you, having an impact on the policies and decision making internally. Gregory, can you start with us off there?
Yes. Again, the community that we're nestled in is a predominantly African-American based community. It's no surprise that our student population reflects the community, so we are officially a recognized PBI by the Department of Education. So in addition to us making the pivot to adjust to COVID-19 and all the challenges that have taken place as a result of that, there's been a lot of social unrest in our society, as we all are aware of. Our college, as I mentioned before, has formulated a community advisory committee, which consists of community leaders here in Inglewood, faith-based organizations, elected officials, and residents of the community. So there's been many protests and marches in recent months. And as a result of our involvement with our community advisory committee, many of our administrators and faculty and staff have participated in those events, particularly the Juneteenth rally that took place not too long ago, but also our students were engaged as well. So again, it kind of speaks to this engagement in the community to address some of these issues that are taking place that had direct impact on members of this community. And then also you can see this as an extension of the classroom in terms of real life engagement, in terms of allowing for change to take place within our society. So again, as we mentioned before, while these issues have presented challenges, it also provided us with opportunities to have impact. And we like to think real impact.
Yeah, thank you. Davis?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that question, which is such an interesting one. So at a small college like this, part of what I like about it is we have a shared governance system, right? And so faculty serve on elected committees that set many of the policies. It's not sort of administratively top down. Sometimes people ask me, what do you do as the provost? And I say, I'm the chief discussant. I just talk to people all the time and sort of figure out where they're at and try to enact the various policies that we have. So we have faculty, staff, and student participation in those kind of official organs, but just like everybody, we have a generation of students, and I'm really cheered by this, that are more politically aware, I think, than maybe I was when I was in college a long time ago, right, in a very different milieu, and are not immune to all of the terrible things that are going on around the world. And we have to recognize, and we have, that students are bringing their lived experience to the classroom. And so again, if we think of ourselves as town and gown, we lose. We have a faculty diversity commitment statement, which basically says a version of what I've just suggested to you. We understand that our students come in with their lives, and the events that happen to them are part of that tapestry, and the education that they get from us is part of that same tapestry. And we have a responsibility to be responsive to those needs and to let them guide us in the change that sometimes in many ways for higher ed is long overdue. So many people, and this goes back to the remote thing, want to hold on to some aspect of what I call before the apocalypse. Can we still do the thing we used to do? And sometimes, yes, that can become remote. But sometimes you're holding on to something just because you've always been holding on to it, right? And if you look what's in your hand, you may not be entirely happy with what's there. And so I really think just that endless circle of dialogue, which can be challenging, which can be difficult, and even more difficult in an environment like this, is absolutely essential. And I go back one more thing to our mission statement, which is to create critical thinkers to go out in the world. Well, have we ever had a time where that's more important, right? Even for an institution like mine to make the decision not to mandate that faculty return, to make a decision in the face of pressure, national pressure to open, and for us to say we're going remote. We are enacting those principles every day, and we have to just continuously be at it. And every morning I wake up and say, what do we need to rethink today? Because there's something, and we have to be open to that.
Thank you. Mark, anything you'd add?
Just something, really just two quick things. One is that when I think about the responsiveness of the university to the events that have been happening, both the pandemic and police violence in particular, and the protests that have arisen around it, one thing that I've realized is that we need to count trauma and exhaustion, fatigue, and just utter speechlessness and debility as responses to some of the horrible things that have been happening. And in the humanities, being able to talk about these things and to provide the forum for talking about trauma and talking about the inability to move on and the inability to react seems to be part of what our job is. So I do think that that needs to be acknowledged. But having said that, the university in positive modes of responsiveness has done things like provide fora for students to talk about their affiliations with protests. And we have an engaged humanities initiative that is encouraging students to form projects in response to both the pandemic and police violence. And we have a student, for example, that's connecting current protests to a whole history of protests in Chicago. And that's one of the beauties of being at a research university doing engaged research, is that your job is to be responsive to the context around you. And once you realize that, a crisis becomes something that we can collectively work together on, even though we're also doing things like helping each other through trauma and mourning a lot of lives that have been lost. So that's all I would add to that.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And I think, you know, when we were talking about higher ed or colleges, universities being anchors in their community, so often they do become spaces where that kind of collective mourning and processing can happen. And I do want to shift us to talk about the fact of your physicality in the city, even though you're in a moment of being, you know, sort of disembodied from that, largely from that, you know, historic kind of operation. And start us off with a question from one of the audience members, which is, it brings us back to the issue of safety, but what were any unexpected challenges your institutions had to navigate between local and national expectations around safety? Gregory, did that kind of, you know, we've had lots of different mandates coming from different levels. We've had lots of response to the way that universities or colleges have made decisions. Did any of that play out at Kennedy King in a specific way you could share?
Right. So I think for most institutions, the most effective means was to go to an online or virtual approach to delivering instruction. But like many community colleges that are comprehensive, we provide, in addition to the traditional academic programming for students that want to go on to a transfer to university, we also provide the workforce development programs as well. So many of those programs are difficult to provide online. We talked about some of those prior to the show beginning. So we had to allow for those courses to be administered in person. And some of them were viewed as also being recognized as being essential programs through the state of Illinois, through essential workers in terms of, you know, providing a workforce necessity there. So that's been one thing that we've had to be really keenly aware of in terms of making sure that the safety protocols are being followed, that we're utilizing social distancing and taking care of the sanitary requirements and making sure that the spaces are clean before and after and during the utilization of those spaces. So we developed an extensive, elaborate safety plan at the college to make sure that we were allowing for our faculty and our students and staff and administrators to come into a safe environment. So we took that on as a challenge, but it was something that we needed to do anyway. And I think we responded overall very well.
Thank you. Mark Canuel, what about for UIC? And I know there's been, and one of the other things I was thinking about, there has been response from within the university, right, about the decisions being made around safety. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's also been a factor in addition to these local and national kinds of expectations.
Yes, well, And of course, I have to couch all of these comments in the fact that this is coming from the director of an Institute for the Humanities and not a health expert and not an administrator at the level of decision making for the whole campus. So this is sort of, the sort of what would be the opposite of a bird's eye view. It would be the ant's eye view of what is happening, which doesn't mean that it's worthless, but rather very particular, which is that, of course, we're seeing directives, as we're talking about, coming from everywhere, and very contradictory ones. But as a university that's plop in the middle of the city, we've been very much thinking about ourselves as part of a community and responsive to it when we've been making these decisions about what we're doing. And so it has felt as if we're making these decisions under the pressure of the moment. And when I have conversations, for example, about what we're doing in the spring, I'm thinking about programming in the spring and assuming that maybe we'll do things in person. But every conversation that I have with people is, well, that would be nice, but probably not, but maybe. And so, you don't really know exactly what is happening. And I guess from the standpoint of a scholar, I'm a practicing scholar and a director of a research institute. I'm constantly aware of the fact that a virus is not a discourse. There's a discourse about the virus, but when it comes to making decisions, there are some things that are just not discussable, and the things that are not discussable have to do with just baseline safety. Can people go into a room without feeling like they're going to get the virus and die from it? Well, I mean, at the moment, the answer is no. And so this sense of decision making that's outside of our powers to deliberate and think things through as humanists really has been the sobering quality of this whole chain of events.
Davis, I want to stay kind of on this, but shift the question slightly. And this goes to another question we got from an audience member, which is how the remote learning environment is affecting students. So, what you were just saying, Mark, about sort of these baseline decisions, there are students whose financial aid also involves working on campus. And so the campus has multiple functions. It's obviously a space of learning, but also of work. What's happening with those students? And maybe Mark and Gregor, you can jump in as well.
Yeah, that's such an important question, and I appreciate whoever put it into the chat. I'll just go back very quickly to what Mark and Gregory said and agree entirely. And one thing that's become clear to me in the last couple of months, I guess I always knew this, but I hadn't thought about it, is when you mix science and politics, you get politics, right? And so there's so much pressure nationally for certain things to happen and locally for certain things to happen that that can really cloud decision making and sometimes lead toward a series of bad decisions that seem like good decisions. We also know that many of us, all of us, would prefer to be back in person, and that so many of our students learn better in person, whether they have a disability accommodation, whether they don't have a stable home environment, whether it's simply that digital divide, whether they are students with executive functioning issues that just could benefit from the hallway conversations with counselors. In many ways, we are a small boutique operation of intrusive advising that I say very proudly. So to convert all of that to remote, it's all possible, but it doesn't mean you just take it and then replicate it exactly. You make the changes that are going to make it work most effectively. For students that have been disproportionately affected financially and may not have access to jobs, well, I said before, we have a very small complement of students on campus, something like 50, and we've tried to find jobs for all of those students who are here because they are here, right? And that is safe for us to work with them because we have the protocols. But there is no doubt that other students have lost access to work study and other areas that they might have depended upon in a different time. For all students who are continuing with us when we made the decision to pivot, we offered a 10% tuition discount or a free course in J-term or our summer term. We're having a J-term for the first time in 30 years because we've extended the winter break in order to try and create a little more distance between the fall and the spring. So that's one small way to help. Our financial aid office has been working overtime to sort of help families think through their aid packages and look for opportunities to rethink how they're going to pay for the education, and for us to make the adjustments that we can make in order to let people continue. And then, like all colleges, we have a student emergency fund. It could always be larger, but we've had special fundraising to replenish it and to deliver, just in time support for students. So if a student needs something and we become aware of it, that's the great thing about a small community, is a lot of people can become aware of an issue, and we have always good mechanisms for getting that information to the people that can help. None of this is a complete replacement for what would be happening if we were together, but I think in each case we respond as best we can, and we go further than we've gone before in order to be responsive, because we're required to by the situation. That's what having a duty of care really means, and at a time like this.
Gregory, what about your student body and those students who might be working on campus in a variety of ways?
Well, the question is really interesting, given that we just talked about this on campus yesterday, in fact. I think the national data is crystal clear. If you look at the retention data for community colleges throughout the United States, it's very evident that students that work off campus tend not to be retained at the level of students who do work on campus. So that's a predictive variable. So obviously we're concerned about the loss of that capacity for students to work through work study as a form of financial aid on campus. But it's my understanding that there is a provision within that scope that allows for students to utilize the work study while working at a relevant operation off campus. And we're exploring that possibility as we speak right now. So we're working in that regard. Will that replace effectively the impact of student engagement on campus? Arguably, it's arguably not. But I think we can kind of put some elements there that can kind of simulate those connectivity points through working with organizations off campus.
Mark, I want to shift back to the issue of other elements that make up campus life. And we're coming near to the end of our time. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, like if there are protests outside, how does that affect operations inside? But there are also protests within. The last couple of days, there's been a hashtag scholar strike, where faculty and administrators across institutions of higher learning have done a kind of virtual walkout today and yesterday, not teaching, not doing administrative work. And some are making connections between the broader social critique going on around racism or police violence, and linking that up to racism or anti-Blackness within education. And I'm just curious, like how that, what role you think that kind of political protest by faculty, by students plays within campus life. What's the importance of that right now? I mean, obviously you all had talked about being responsive to this moment, but when the protest is within, what role does that offer the kind of campus experience, or what role does it play within that experience?
I think that this is a great question, and at a campus that is so populated by students of color and by immigrant students, we are in a community that is very responsive to and very tuned into the politics that are outside the campus, which I've already said is not really outside, but it is really deeply connected to the campus. And so these the activities of our students and in league with our faculty really do make a difference in the tone of the university, and they can make a difference toward change. And universities are powerful agents of change. We are major employers within our city. We send alumni out into our city. We do have a huge megaphone so that students and faculty who are advocating for issues, they do get their voices heard. And so I actually do think that when there are movements on campus in one direction or another, and particularly, I think that the whole discussion of immigration over the past years of the Trump presidency has been a great example of that, that campuses really have had a powerful voice in speaking up to some of the administration policies. And I also think that one of the things that's happening now, now that people are not actually gathering on campus, there are online means of making people's voices heard on campus. So our African American Cultural Center has a big part of its website devoted to student voices over the past few months in reaction to police violence. Tanika Johnson is going to be presenting her work today, this afternoon, in relation to the social justice initiative. And so while we are not a place that is a gathering place physically at the moment, we're able to offer that online presence that can make these voices heard.
Gregory and Davis, in that order, when the protest turns to the institution itself, to the University of College, how do you accommodate that? What are the opportunities you see in the campus itself being a space for articulating that kind of protest?
Once again, being located in Englewood, which is a predominantly African-American population, along with our student population, we felt an obligation to allow for multiple means of engagement. And we talked about the rallies and the demonstrations and participation in that regard among our students and faculty and staff. But also we conducted a forum dealing directly with the issues of racial injustice in our society and institutionalized racism, and got into the issues of inequity as it pertains particularly to the African American community and related to some of the police brutality we've seen over the last for extended period of time, I should say. What was really interesting is that given that we were dealing with the pandemic and we were in a virtual instruction format, we thought the turnout among our students would be relatively small, but we felt obligated to provide this discussion, this very sincere and real discussion around this very sensitive topic. To our surprise, we had a large turnout of students. And also we opened up to the community as well. So members of the college community as well as the external community participated. We had a scholar, African-American Studies, that led the charge in the discussion along with our Dean of Students here at the college as well. Another partnership, obviously, with UIC, no less as well, in addition to our own team as well. So again, allowing for an opportunity to unpack the phenomenon on a historical level in terms of racism in this country was part of the dialogue, but looking at also a contemporary means as well, look at some of the issues that are taking place currently in our society. And what does it mean for a young African-American in our society today? And what are some of the skills they can utilize in order to navigate the here and now and also going forward into the future? So hopefully we were able to provide our students specifically with some of the skill sets that are required for them to be able to effectively navigate in our society.
Davis, did you want to add anything to that?
Those were such great answers. I just want to say how much I appreciate what both Mark and Gregory said. I know that we're coming to the end of the time, so I'll be brief too. We want students, particularly, I mean, at all institutions, but certainly at a place like ours, to be able to connect the dots, right? To be able to go out and to advocate for change. And when they advocate for change on the campus, which happens at our campus and all other campuses, we're obligated to listen, we're obligated to hear that, and we're obligated to go back to something I said earlier, to know that good intentions have to be matched by good policies, right? That talk has to be matched by action, and that our job, my job, is to help people think about the implications of what we do, whether it's the level of the syllabus or whether it's the level of the promotion and tenure system, or whether it's the level of how we disperse some faculty research funds in the summer, or whether it's the level of name 10,000 other examples. Are those all defensible, and do they fit in, to use one of the frames I used earlier, with a kind of anti-racist mindset? Do they help move society in the direction that we want to collectively move it? Or are they historical vestiges of something that we need to revisit? Those are vital conversations. They're not always easy conversations, but they're absolutely essential, and they're powered so much by the energy of our students. And that's one of the things that makes me want to get up and go to work every day, or at least get up from downstairs and walk upstairs to this room.
Just one final, that we'll do a kind of a lightning round of closing thoughts from all of you. You know, there's also been lots of calls for disrupting higher ed at this moment. And you all, to your credit, have talked about opportunities for reimagining, you know, how the campus functions, all kinds of things at your university. So as you continue with your fall session, are there one or two thoughts you have about critical areas that you do agree could be disrupted or be transformed that we haven't yet talked about? Mark, why don't you start us?
Well, you know, crisis is just another word for, you know, change. I think that, and this is, while this is a crisis moment that we're in, this is part of a long-term change to realize some of the organic changes that have been happening for a long time, and to realize some of the organic relations between the university and the community, and the university's responsiveness to its communities beyond is absolutely central in our thinking moving ahead, and our current moment just brings that to the fore.
Davis?
Yeah, I'd say there's a huge disruption coming that is completely separate, well, maybe not completely separate from the pandemic. And a great book for people interested is called Demographics and the Demand for Higher Education by a professor at Carleton College named Nathan Graw. There is a huge demographic change coming in the next 10 years to the college-going population. And nationally, it drops by 15%. And the numbers are not good in the Northeast or the Midwest in particular. So every college, including mine, is going to have a meaningfully different student body within the space of a blink of an eye. And so all of the things we've already been talking about, because colleges need to further diversify and further be responsive to changing student demographics, become even more important. But folly on any college that only is looking at next week. If you're not looking 5 years ahead and 10 years ahead, you've got a major, major challenge coming your way. And I just think all of this, what we're talking about, does some version of remoteness persist after the apocalypse? Those are all the questions that we have to ask, but we have to sort it toward the actual demographics of higher ed to come.
And Gregory Thomas, I'll give you the final word.
It's interesting. We had undergone a strategic enrollment management planning process and strategic planning process prior to COVID-19. And one of the themes that emerged for both documents was the importance of the theme of equity. So it's really fascinating that here we've come on the opposite end of the pandemic, and also with the social unrest. And we see these themes are still there. We look at the equity issue in terms of healthcare. What populations are more vulnerable in our society to be subjected to pandemics? You know, again, that's addressed in our actions in our plan, as well as the social unrest issues and equity. Again, interesting to note, we had sort of these processes prior to what we're currently undergoing. So it just speaks to the validity that these issues are there in our society systemically and historically. Unfortunately, I don't see those things changing anytime soon, but all of us collectively could do our parts at our institutions to have social impact in our society.
Thank you for that. I want to thank everyone who joined us today for this conversation, and remind you that this evening at 7 p.m. Central, we're going to continue our focus on higher education by asking what's next in terms of speech on campus and some of the the subjects that we touched on today around the political protests and protecting speech, but also protecting people from speech on campus, which has been a really hot button topic in the last little while. So I hope you'll tune in for that. And in the meantime, please join me in thanking our guests today, David Schneiderman, Mark Canuel, and Gregory Thomas. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.